Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Business PNG. The APEC senior officials recently concluded the third senior officials meetings here in Port Moresby in the lead up to the APEC economic leaders meetings in November. APEC senior officials recently concluded a timely cluster of trade and sectoral meetings in Port Moresby, with signs of momentum towards addressing near and long-term challenges heading into a set of pivotal minister-level meetings. Providing constructive dialogue in the face of global frictions over trade, officials work to establish areas of common ground for advancing APEC's target of free and open trade and investment in the region by 2020, known as the Bogor Goals and post-2020 vision.
Particularly under Priority 2 discussions on promoting sustainable and inclusive growth, promoting food security is a key issue, with a focus on inclusive and sustainable resource development, focusing on the resource sector, such as forestry, agriculture, fisheries, mining, and other extractive industries, including tourism. It promotes MSMEs in the value chain and initiates policy discussions and recommendations to our APEC leaders on issues pertaining to sustainable and inclusive resources, development and trade.
Officials recognized the challenging policy landscape and fleshed out ways to uphold progress achieved in APEC to reduce tariffs and other bottlenecks to trade at and behind borders, improve the investment environment, and opened up opportunities for large and small businesses in the region.
For example, what that means so far is looking at how digital possibilities can improve production and efficiency, can improve environmental health and safety, can improve stakeholder engagement, can improve risk management. And we know that some of those possibilities don't automatically, some will help inclusivity, some will not necessarily, and we are talking about other options as well, like reskilling and possibilities of startups in the industry.
According to Ambassador Pomelo, the economies have made progress, but progress has also slowed down and in some cases not progressed at all. He said with the target date of 2020 still 2 years away, APEC member economies should redouble efforts.
Information and reliable data informs decision makers to make decisions effectively, and it makes decisions relevant.
The next sets of meetings are the APEC Women in the Economy Forum next month to address barriers to greater women's entrepreneurship and participation in the digital economy. The APEC Finance Ministers' meetings will take place in October to address issues such as financial inclusion and infrastructure financing vital to digital development in Papua New Guinea and the region. This is all lead up to the APEC Economic Leaders Week in November. I'm Leanne Gerari in Kokopo and you're watching Business PNG. Following the 7.5 magnitude earthquake earlier this year, 2018 has no doubt been a trying year for PNG registered Oil Search Limited. However, the company revealed a solid recovery with their 2018 first half results at $79.2 million after tax. Though this is 39% lower than the company's 2017 results, owing to a 31% reduction in production and sales volumes due to a temporary shutdown of both Oil Search operated production and the PNG LNG project following the earthquake.
Well, the first half of 2018 has been one of the most challenging in the company's 89-year history, with the devastating 7.5 magnitude earthquake and the many aftershocks severely impacting oil and gas production and therefore our revenues and profit during this period. Given these challenges, and they were big challenges, and the impact of some security-related incidents in PNG, the delivery of a first-half profit of $79.2 million represents, I think, a very creditable achievement, recognising it represents a drop of 39% compared to the first half of 2017. Production was impacted by the shutdown of our operated oil fields in PNG LNG, resulting in a 31% decline in oil and gas production and subsequent revenues flowing on from that, somewhat mitigated by higher oil and gas prices year on year, which positively impacted the final revenue numbers.
According to Botten, all production facilities are now back online, with PNG LNG presently operating above pre-earthquake levels and production from oil searches operated facilities progressively ramping up.
We entered 2018 with a number of major work initiatives as core objectives for the organisation, obviously outside personal and process safety objectives. I'm pleased to say that we've made serious progress on all our core objectives. We've aligned the PNG LNG and Papua LNG partners to a smart, efficient development concept which cooperatively develops 3 new LNG trains as the next major investment in Papua New Guinea. These developments have the potential to almost double our LNG production over the next 5 years. Our focus now is to finalise negotiations of the fiscal terms for the developments with the government in Papua New Guinea, with a target of concluding terms and hopefully progressing front-end engineering design for an announcement sometime in November this year. These are huge investments for us and PNG, and we must all strive to strike the right balance of rewards for developers, for government and landowners, and indeed the people of Papua New Guinea. Significant progress has also been made on ways we can optimise our short to medium term oil production and expand our gas production from our oil fields. These programs, that will form part of our 2019 budget, can bring new reserves, improve cash flows and sustained higher levels of production to our operated fields, a real opportunity to refresh our business.
I'm Leanne Gerari in Brisbane, and you're watching Business PNG. In Sydney for the recent 2018 PNG Investment Conference, publishing editor for the Business Advantage International, Andrew Wilkins, sat down with acting MD for PNG Power, Carolyn Blacklock, to discuss cheaper energy options in the country.
So if people do have any questions, just put up your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Carolyn, maybe we can start, and I might move over to policy as far as what's going to be built, and then the execution of delivery of power on the ground. So you've got what used to be the IPBC and now is Cornwall Consolidated Holdings, which is the holding company for PNG Power, getting very involved in actually building power stations, for example, or commissioning power stations. And then PNG Power is then running them. Does this change the arrangement? Is the new paradigm going to be about PNG Power having much more control over that agenda as well as the actual transmission and delivery of power to the population?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'd have to be a PNG citizen and I'd have to be elected official to be actually able to answer you properly. But I think for PNG Power, what we're interested in is delivery and less talk. We've seen a project in KCH, for instance, not materialise after a number of years in development. I don't think we want that kind of teasing to investment. We really want certainty. We would much rather smaller, more meaningful delivered projects than larger hay burners, as my father would have called them. I think that we're very interested in taking on the capital ourselves to do long-term hydro. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that if you have a compelling story, I'm obviously not an engineer, and the only thing I know anything about is a little bit of banking. And my understanding of where PNG Power is that if we can get the balance sheet into reasonable shape, not even great shape, the development partners and soft lenders would happily help us with this endeavour. That cost of capital is a lot less than we're currently raising it either through the government or ourselves. So I think that we need to take charge of our own destiny. I don't see KCH as standing in our way. I think we've just been so pathetic that we've done nothing, so somebody had to do something. But I don't necessarily see that as part of our future. I'm pretty sure KCH haven't as well. They've just signed over Ramu 2 to us, right. Which I'm not sure what that is a good thing or a bad thing, but we've got to put up or shut up, right? But I think that You know, one thing in PNG Power that strikes me as amazing is Unitech is a fantastic institution of turning out good engineers, and PNG Power has fantastic engineers. We might lack discipline, and we might have lacked the kind of leadership and strategic decisioning needed to give them the permission to go out and develop projects, but when you do, gee, they really relish it. So I think we probably are the house in the government family which is best positioned to at least do the development of projects. I would certainly like to see the National Electrification Rollout Plan not be all of PNG Power's burden. It feels a bit like, you know, if it's going to be done, it's going to be up to us. I think the department will get there, but, you know, we probably are racing ahead a little bit on sort of the electrification agenda as well.
You mentioned access to capital and the need to finance PNG Power's plans for the future, and we have some of the organisations that are going to be participating in the room today. How do you think it's possible for PNG Power to maybe leverage the private sector more in what you want to do? Because obviously that will have a multiplier effect on what you're able to achieve.
Yeah, I think it's you've got to figure out what project you need where, and then you have to figure out who are the friendly participants in that. You know, we've got superannuation firms in Papua New Guinea now that are more than capable of undertaking, for instance, a reasonable portion, 20-30% of quite large, you know, capital-intensive projects like hydropower. So these could be structured like IPPs, but quite frankly be owned by Papua New Guineans. And I mean, it'd be great one day to see that the capital market is developed enough that we could even use the capital market to go and raise money through mums and dads, investors and others. I think we're a little bit away from that, but I think in the meantime, there's nothing stopping us using a proxy capital market, which I call the super funds. And I think that it fits very nicely with nation building. It fits very nicely with their investment profiles of having longer terms, etc., more patient capital. But alongside that, you've got to have know-how. And, you know, maybe the superannuation companies would need something more than PNG Power to feel comfortable, particularly on larger projects. So that is where the real sweet role for the private sector is coming in and being the developer, the co-developer, but quite frankly, sort of on our terms, or at least the roadmap built by us, and not the sort of unsolicited, you know, catapulted in deals where the local investor is the end of the story, not the start of the story.
I'm Leanne Durari in Port Moresby, and you're watching Business PNG.
So you mentioned some very exciting targets over the next 10 years. I mean, I'm sure everyone in the room would welcome a reduction of tariffs of 50% and the coverage to 70% of the population over that period of time. As far as where you see demand coming from, increased demand coming from over the next 2 to 3 years, what sectors or what parts of PNG are you projecting are going to be where the biggest demand will be?
Yeah, well, I think the era of mines doing captive power should be behind us. I think that the mining companies can be the real catalyst for change in PNG. If you look at the Ramu grid, you know, these are tiny grids. For anyone not familiar with our grids, we're talking about a peak capacity of maybe 117, 120 megs on the Ramu system on a really big night. We need to get that to probably 400 megs over the next 12 years. It's not huge growth. No. It is for us, though, when you've got a transmission system that's still half distribution, half transmission. So we're still running really skinny wire and trying to get electrons to move 600 kilometres and wondering why it goes all bugger up sometimes. So I think that the investment needs not just be in the generation. We need to think about the investment probably triple just in network. I think the mines, if we think about distributed hydropower, so not just the massive, but the smaller hydropowers around the grid, it makes the grid much more stable. I think we really, you know, and I'm pushing the agenda very hard to look at expansion of Hyde's gas and also something at Kutubu. I think that because it gives us redundancy. I would really like to see us build the transmission line from Porgera across to Pounder. I think, again, that would be the first time we'd have a loop on the line. At the moment, if you have a break on that very long transmission line, everybody past that point loses power. Yeah. And the landowners are particularly skillful at burning and chopping down trees at just the right point to make sure the pain is the highest so that they may have got compensation in the past. So we've got those sorts of energy security challenges, not just energy price challenges. If you look at the islands, if you go to somewhere like Kokopo, that province is so well organised, so much invested into what the future looks like, and we're not fronting up. You know, we supply them with 10 megs. You know, Warrangai Hydro is down to 3 megs. It should be 10. There's nothing we can do about it. It's a pretty rubbish system in lots of ways, so we need to rebuild it. But in the meantime, we're relying on leased gensets. Now, we've had years to think about the growth in Kokopo, and we're not talking about a big number, but Manus is without power today, and there is no plan B. So some of this is not just price. What people want is certainty. You want to, if you're living in Manus and you're operating a store or you're in home, you want to know that if the diesel isn't delivered, you know, you're not going to have no power for the next 6 days. You're actually going to have a solar or a hybridized system that may be able to reduce the costs in the business as usual, but certainly can be relied upon at least to increase energy security. I think a lot is made of just price and just demand, when really what we need to do in our country is kind of man up and say electricity is a fundamental right and we've just got to get it better. And that's going to cost a reasonable amount of money in the next decade, because we've got to make up for the fact we haven't built a hydropower for 27 years. So that is where I think the investment is going to go in from a demand perspective. Ramu Grid, POM is kind of taken care of itself. We think around 40% of POM power is actually sold for free. So, you know, a chance there is really to get...
We just bill for what you're already producing.
Yeah, that would be nice. And just stop the game, which is obviously, it's PNG Power trucks and men who are probably initiating a lot of those connections. And that's sort of a mindset change. You can't take a pecuniary type approach. We know that they don't work. So some of those things, it's not so much about demand, it's just a change of the way in which we all sell and then buy electricity.
Now, was there any questions from the floor? I don't know whether I've seen any hands. There is. Charles, there's one microphone just there. If you'd just like to introduce yourself, and then please feel free to ask Carolyn your question.
Morning, Carol. It's Ian Turret here from NASFAN. First of all, commendations on a very informative presentation. I think it's your to-do list is commendable. I know there's a lot of work there, but I think you can do it. Just a comment, your action plan to include your people on the ground, I think that's the way to go. Just a question, there's a number of conversations on alternate power generating opportunities. How does that fit in with the plan that you have for PNG Power going forward? And you mentioned that, super funds are potentially, part of the equation to provide some solutions.
Yeah, I think what PNG Power has to do is have an IPP policy. Normally you would see this come out of a department. You wouldn't see it come out of the utility company. But we are a bit special. So I think the first thing is to make sure that there's clarity around the pathway so that we're not wasting people's time, as when investors do spot an opportunity that they do have a very clear path through. For instance, countries like Indonesia have gone down the path of even further than that, Nepal, and saying, here's what price we will pay you. Don't bother coming to see us unless it fits in this price range, and if it does, we'll tell you through a very well-published chart when we're going to buy that power from you. So it's a very prescriptive environment, and that's what electricity planning should be about. Secondly is the publishment of the least cost power development plan. I think that we need to be able to say, here's the demand that we're seeing, and here's where we think we're going to need the power to come from, and then to say to the private sector, through a competitive process, this is how we are giving you the opportunity to respond.
And that's all we have for this episode of Business PNG. For more information, or if you would simply like to view this episode again, visit EMTV online at the URL at the bottom of your screen. Or to simply join the conversation, like our page on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at the Twitter handle at Business PNG. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Leanne Jarari, and this was Business PNG.